Pat. Welcome everyone. My name is Caroline Colas and I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Today on our Lunch and Learn series, we are going to be talking to Dan Lerner. In this new era of well-being, how COVID-19 is changing our perspective on health, happiness, and opportunity. Is there any part of our lives that COVID-19 hasn't touched, whether it's the way we learn, work, connect with each other, or even spend our leisure time? It's clear that pretty much everything has been transformed by this pandemic. But what interests performance coach and positive psychologist Dan Lerner is the most is how the pandemic changes our perspective on our well-being. In this session, Dan will draw on real-life stories and examples from his class, The Science of Happiness at New York University, to explore the unique challenges we are facing: isolation, low mood, collective loss, even financial hardship. At the same time, he will show how to make room for new opportunities to thrive. With his signature high-energy brand of storytelling, Lerner will offer us simple yet powerful insights on how to make sense of the coronavirus tragedy while maintaining our hope and caring for ourselves and each other. And just so you know a little bit about Dan, a psychology professor, strength-based performance coach, and expert on all things positivity, Dan Lerner studies how happiness influences success. 2 decades as a talent agent at some of the world's top firms prepared him for his current vocation as a sought-after coach. Today, he works with everyone from Fortune 500 executives to Metropolitan Opera singers, helping them manage stress, rediscover their strengths, and realize their individual snowflake potential. I added that in. He holds a master's degree from and is on the teaching staff for the graduate program in applied psychology at University of Pennsylvania. And also, are you also on faculty at NYU as well?
I am, yeah. I'm a clinical instructor there. I've been there for, we're just finishing up our 8th year. I've taught the science of happiness there for the last 8 years with my best friend, Dr. Alan Schlechter, who's an adolescent psychiatrist based over at Bellevue. We've taught about 6,000 students in the last 8 years, and it's been, I love NYU. I feel so fortunate to be there and to work not only with my best friend, to work with just this amazing group of students. You know?
Wow. I want to talk a little bit about our young people, because I feel like this virus has affected them so much too. And I know that's one of your areas of expertise, is kind of looking at the psychology of what college is like for our young people, and the sort of misnomer that, oh, college is supposed to be the best years of your life, but in actuality, it can be quite stressful. And I can't even imagine right now, as some people are finishing their degree and graduating, and some people were starting their first year and have it interrupted. What's the landscape for our college students right now?
You know, I appreciate you bringing up the general landscape of college students, which is already quite stressful, as you mentioned. So just for a couple of numbers, just to give people some perspective, according to a 2014 poll of 20,000 college students in the country, when asked if they have felt overwhelming stress each and every year during their time on campus, about 90% of college students have said they felt overwhelming stress each and every year. Now, okay, that's stress. Everyone, I imagine if I ask the question, I can do it from a quick survey. How many people here have been stressed out in the past 3 weeks? You can either hand up, or all the hands, most of the hands are going up. Imagine you put it in the chat box, it would probably fill up as well.
Can we put both hands up?
We can put up, if I had a third hand, it would be up right now. But of course, it's a bit of a trick question because we're right in the middle of this pandemic, and yes. But even when I asked that question 3 months ago or 6 months ago, whether I'm talking in front of a corporate audience or an academic audience, all hands go up. We feel stressed. But when we dive a little deeper for college students and ask them on that survey the question of, have you felt very sad at any point, you know, each and every year on campus, about 60% have said that they felt very sad each and every year on campus. And then you move forward to, have you felt helpless? That number is about 45% each and every year on campus. And then you get to the scary number, which is, according to the 2014 poll, have you dealt with work debilitating depression? And 31.3% of them have dealt with work debilitating depression every year on campus. Now, jump from 2014 to 2017, American College Health Association, same organization, doing the same poll, the same number of students, and every single number goes up considerably, including depression, which jumps from 31.3 in 2014 to 40% of all college students in 2017. So they're under stress, period. And they're suffering in a lot of ways, to your point, when they expect to have the 4 best years of their life. And clearly, this is not contributing to having a best year of your life kind of scenario. So the factors that we discuss in our course and we talk about with students and other folks, the number one factor, the number one predictor that you will not only get through your freshman year, but also graduate and also do so well is the quality of your relationships, right? And that is the predictor throughout life. So everyone here, the predictor of how well we will do, how we will thrive in life, overwhelmingly, the number one factor is relationships, whether you're 3 years old or you're 93 years old. And if you're 18 through 24, the average college age, that's it too. And it's been taken away from them, right? Everyone has left. And so they don't have those relationships to be able to nurture, right? The same way that they had. The interesting thing about college students, and I can't cite a study here because clearly it's too, we're right in the middle of it. But when we moved our first class online, which is after spring break because everyone had gone home. And we had about 500 students in our classroom. And we're always really interactive in our classroom. So this is going to be really awkward, right? We're online. We're going to see faces, some of them, we'll see chat. And I asked the first question. It was something like, who here has gotten through a stressful situation since we left campus? And like the chat box blew up. It was me, great. So is anyone here willing to share an example? I am. And it was so apparent. And then when she responded, I said, Zoe, go ahead and unmute yourself. And she shared a story about her grandmother who had been sick and had gotten better, and she was there with her. The chat box blew up again. Congratulations, that's wonderful. Send our love to your grandmother. And what became so apparent to us was that the relationships that they needed so badly on campus to be able to thrive, they were hungrier than ever for. And so they seem to really find that online. So in exactly this platform, because we work on a Zoom platform at NYU, the classes became really wonderful because people would come. It's so good to see everyone here again. We'd always make sure we make time before and after so how are people doing? And some people would say, I'm doing well, I'm doing okay. Some people would say, I'm quoting, I feel utterly alone. And other people would jump on and say, we're here for you. Here's my email, call me anytime. So they're challenged. And the students that I had who have just graduated, and I stay in very close touch with a lot of my students, are just saying, I really wanted a proper graduation. But they're managing overall quite well. I don't know if it's because they're younger and they adapt that way, or it's technology is something that is not foreign isn't the right term, but for most of us, we're like, oh, Zoom, how novel, how interesting. And for a lot of them, that's how I talk to all my friends since I was 8. So I think that's been helpful for them. But at the same time, I think they found other factors in well-being. Did you have Michael Steger on yet?
Yes,
Okay.
Absolutely.
So
He's been great, yeah.
He's amazing, and his work on meaning is so important. And now we have this challenge to meaning. So if you had a student, or let's move beyond college students, let's move to everyone here.
Yeah.
Let's just say it's our work that was meaningful to us and we're unable to go there now, or family that is meaningful to us, we're unable to be with now. What are our opportunities for meaning? And what I noticed with the students were they were finding them. They were realizing that they were able to ask their neighbors if they need, I'm going on a supermarket run, can I get anything for you? And something small like that, still giving back to the community that way, was meaningful. Like they were finding ways that they wouldn't have thought of before. And I've been hearing that from other folks too, which is I'm finding a way to create meaning in ways I couldn't have imagined before, but it's still an essential component of well-being. So we're figuring out ways to do it even in the new environment.
Well, let's take a page from your playbook with your classes, and why don't we ask everybody on the chat just how they're doing today, and feel free to let us know how you're doing today, because that really is what we're going to be focusing on, is this situation that we're now in, and relationships, as you were saying, being the key factor to determine our success. But how do we relate, or how do we think about going back and seeing one another and socializing one another, and at the same time staying safe? I know that there's one of my friends said, my son wanted to go out and spend time with his other friend, and I finally just decided I was going to say yes, because the isolation was worse than him risking being infected. So it seems like we're we're in those kind of choices right now. Any thoughts?
Yeah. The micro moments is such a great term. I know you talked about that earlier this week, right?
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of the buzz in my circle has been around, and please keep it coming, people. I'd love to hear like how people are doing, what's going well, but also what's challenging potentially. So micro moments are interesting because they're more available to us, right? The odds of us going to have a wonderful meal with our family or friends we haven't seen are slim, but to be able to spend a little time online talking, right? To take a little pleasure, and I'm looking out my windows right now in the leaves on the trees. It just gives me a little bit of peace. Now, in normal times, it'd be like leaves, whatever. I got to get downtown, right? But what are the little things that we can find on a regular basis? Because as you know, from speaking with Barb Fredrickson and her work, they add up, right? Happiness is a bunch of micro moments that come together. So what are we noticing consistently?
Beautiful. Feeding the birds. People in my big apartment building walking through Central Park. I'm anxious about seeing people. Will I be afraid to get close? Wearing a face mask means the other person doesn't have the full effect of my facial expression. I hope I don't become fearful. Right. Yeah, it's realistic.
And it's interesting. I love feeding the birds. It's funny here. My family, when I'm here with my family, we hear the birds, and it's like, wow, listen to that. It's so wonderful now. But it's interesting. There are a couple of things that come up in the chat that I think. Thank you, by the way, everyone, for contributing. And I want to make sure I get to as many as we can. One of the themes I saw is sort of someone said they came back from upstate and now they're here and they're walking along Riverside Park. And someone else said that it's if I have lost it here, basically anxious about seeing people. I'll be afraid to get close, wearing a face mask. I was speaking last night to Heather Berlin, who's a neuroscientist and psychiatrist here in the city, and we were talking about how do you start to deal with anxiety? How do you start to find your way back during this time when we want to be careful? And for a lot of us, there's a healthy fear around these things. And she was saying, if you go outside and stand in front of your building, if that's all you can do right now, okay, right? We had the one contributor who said, I walked down Riverside Park, which a lot of people here won't be ready for. Right? But if you can stand outside with your mask on for a few minutes and go, I'm okay, I'm outside. I'm gonna go back in now. And then the next day to go and maybe walk to the end of your block and then come back. It's basically getting yourself used to the idea that it's not a black and white thing. There are ways to start getting increasingly comfortable with things, right? So I go out every morning with my son and our two dogs and to the park, Riverside Park as well, an hour or two. And I see people without masks. I see more and more people without masks. And it's gone from, this is really terrifying, to, I just need to step back and keep my distance. This is what's happening right now. I need to find a way without getting overly anxious. And I've noticed anxiety diminish slowly, but regularly. So it's taking that extra step, one step, another step.
Yeah. And not being triggered by, Debbie Toomey was saying yesterday that as a nurse, she was saying she sees all kinds of responses, and that some people, their response to stress actually is to throw caution to the wind, right? And some people get super cautious. And she said, please know that everyone's handling the stress the best way that they can. And it sort of gave me a little bit more compassion for those that were like, I can't deal with this, right? I'm dealing with it in my way. But like you said, taking the responsibility and saying, okay, that's your choice, and I'm going to cross the street.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I gotta say, it's helpful to have a 12-year-old kid too, because his response would be, why aren't they wearing a mask? Which I'm sure they got from me earlier on. And I said, exactly as you just said, Caroline, which is all we can control is what we do. It's not for us to control others. And if that means crossing the street, that means crossing the street. And not concerning ourselves with them, but doing the best we can do to wear a mask, so on and so forth. Right?
So you were framing this virus as potentially a chance for opportunity. Mm-hmm. And when we're looking at success, and I think it's certainly been an opportunity for nature, Everywhere around the world, I'm seeing pictures of places that were polluted and you couldn't even see, and there was smog and stuff, and suddenly people can breathe and they're hearing birds and that kind of thing. So there certainly has been an opportunity for our earth to breathe and to also regenerate. But in what way do you see this, especially in your relationship and your study of success, as an opportunity for us as lay people or as athletes, or whatever we want to be doing?
Sure. No, it's a great question. I really appreciate that question. I want to say one thing just quickly, because I've seen a number of folks. I just want to address it really briefly.
Sure.
A number of folks saying, I haven't seen my family. I miss my family. Maybe they're far away. I'm concerned about seeing my kids, my grandkids. It's a number of folks in California. I'm sure lots of folks are missing others. And one person noted, I had a good Zoom meeting with my friend this morning. Those are the micro moments in a way. Sort of, if we can't get to California, to be able to at least schedule regularly times when we can be on Zoom, which is not the same thing, but at least to know that we can be in their lives some way. It's, again, there's more of an effect that some of us give it credit for. Like human beings just seeing one another, even in this format, can be helpful. So I just want to say, acknowledge that, because it's a really hard one. I think maybe the hardest of all is not being able to see your loved ones.
Right, especially with summertime and vacation plans and people, thinking about, I was going to see my family and now I'm not sure. And not to mention all the weddings, graduations, celebrations, those kind of things that people are thinking.
Births. Oh my gosh, births.
Births.
Yeah. The kids and no one else has been able to spend time with them, their family, their parents. So,
yeah.
But to your question about success, I want to be clear that I am not a happyologist, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, everything's wonderful. Isn't this great, everybody? There are lots of challenges and issues that we can certainly talk about, and we have to acknowledge if we're going to be able to get through this, and also to build resilience. But yes, I definitely see silver linings here. And it's interesting, you acknowledged the nature thing, which is the planet seems like it's cleaner than it's been since, I can't remember what the date was, but a long, long time. Yeah. And so for us, what are our opportunities? I was having a Zoom call last week with a group that I work with, that remain unnamed, but they're very, very successful young performers. And we're kind of on the cusp of major careers. And we talk about what are the challenges psychologically to performing, what are the opportunities, how do we deal with stress, so on and so forth. But one of the themes that came out of that, which I thought was really quite wonderful, especially from that group that has worked so hard and is right there on the cusp, was almost a sense of reset. Because especially in New York, one could argue, I think, we're so focused on it's drive, right? Must be better. And often it must be better than that person, or that person must be faster, must make more, and part of the reason the city hums the way it does is because of that. Now, as we all know, you can go too far where that's unhealthy. And when else could the planet have had a chance to go, oh, there are no CO2 emissions happening whatsoever right now? Like, no way it happens other than this way. And it's similar to us to say, when else are we going to be able to not only say, I need to take a moment to think about where I am, what's important to me, what's well-being for me, not only for us to do it, but for every single person, at least 99% of the people around us, to do it as well. Because we're not necessarily at the workplace. In some cases, a real challenge is we're not working, period. But to sit back and go, I'm really enjoying taking a little extra time with my family, or I'm really enjoying reading this book that I've been hoping to read for a while, or I'm really enjoying learning this instrument, or I'm really enjoying really doing nothing. It doesn't have to be accomplishment, but just letting my mind go. One of the things I talked about again with Dr. Berlin last night was taking some time each day to just let your mind go and not concern yourself with what's going on. Yes, I'm currently on the third Schitt's Creek in a row that I've watched on, on whatever, Prime or Netflix. It's okay, like, for my mind just to not be working all the time. I'm curious to know what our work, not what our work's gonna look like, who is going to take the lessons we've learned right now and apply them afterwards, right? So for example, I think it was Twitter that said, any employee that wants to work from home from now on can work from home from now on. What other companies are gonna do that? Are they finding that people are actually doing better, right? Because they have the chance to slow down a little bit. And from an individual perspective, I look at it a little bit like almost like, and this is not my area of expertise, but it's almost like a pattern interrupt for midlife crisis, right? That is to say, oh, I just hit this age. Oh my gosh, I'm not 20 anymore. Now I'm 40 or now I'm 50. What happened to my life? And so, and then it happens throughout life. Where did the last 10 years go? A chance to stop and go, what really is important to me right now? And how can I get a little bit more of that into my life, both today, and create a habit that's going to extend through when we're getting back to normal. So I think a lot of it is being able to rethink what's important to us and figuring out ways that we can put that into our daily routine.
Speaking of pattern interrupting, you sort of in your work, you talk about, I don't think I'm using the right term, but I want to say sort of obsessive desire for performance, and then sort of like a flowing in performance. And it seems like that ability to interrupt our patterns or not be obsessive about success is crucial here too, because I see that there are some people that are just working harder than ever, right? To catch up and to pivot and to do all of that. So can you talk a little bit about those two things?
Sure. So I think what we're talking about here is passion. And there's some really wonderful research on passion. It's been sort of what I've been most passionate about for the last number of years. And please understand, folks, so people on the call, I spent about 10 years in the music business. I was an agent at a very large talent agency, first Columbia Artists, and then ICM, International Creative Management. And I was representing mostly opera singers, classical musicians. And so at a very, very high level. And so I would see people everyone is successful, right? If you're a performer and you're represented by ICM, you're successful, right? You're out there, you're making money, your name's on marquees, you're singing in wonderful places. But what I noticed was that, and one of the reasons I left, was that a number of my clients were successful and they were happy people. They were successful on stage and off stage. But a number of them also were equally successful and not happy. And clearly it wasn't black or white. There was a whole spectrum of folks. But I was really curious about why. What is it that would allow one person to realize a life where they're successful on stage and off, that has well-being off, and that the other side is successful and it doesn't have well-being off. And it's one of the reasons I left. And so I left the business and went back to grad school. And so this research on passion really touches on it. I think it's exactly what you're speaking to here, Carolyn, which is Bob Vallerand, a researcher at the University of Montreal, talks about two very distinctive types of passion, again, with lots of gray area in between. One is called harmonious passion, which is, as I'll mention in a moment, it's what it sounds like. It's a passion that works in harmony with the rest of your life. And the others is called obsessive passion. And that's a passion where, just as it sounds like, you're obsessed and you can't put it down. And so the way that we describe these things, these pursuits, I think people can see in lots of different ways in their own lives, and they can see with people around them. Harmonious passions really begin because, well, they're rooted in the idea that we love what we do, right? And this is really easy to see in kids. So, if anyone here has a kid or has a grandkid, or if you don't, you've been one, so you get it. A 5-year-old is a 5-year-old, and a 5-year-old wakes up and they're like, bing, time to play with Legos. Bing, time to color. Bing, time to read a book. Bing, time to go outside. You don't think about anything else. This is what I want to do. And at some point, for many of us, we've, how many people here, I'm just looking at one screen, show of hands, how many people here played a musical instrument growing up? Just curious. All right, that's about 80%. So but keep your hands up if you played a musical instrument growing up. All right, if you're still playing that instrument, keep your hand up. Right, exactly. Now, there are lots of reasons why that doesn't happen, but part of it can be because we're playing outside or with our Legos or finger painting, and our mom or dad calls us in. It's time to practice. We're like, oh, I don't want to go practice. I hate playing the piano, but we do it. And that moves on to our adult life where it's like, oh, is it 5 o'clock yet? Is it 5 o'clock yet? Is it 5 o'clock yet? Or, am I able to really enjoy what I do? Right? I'm not looking at the clock, and it's something that I love to do. So the harmonious versus obsessive passion it's particularly stark, I'd say, in New York, where people are racing and often competing. For harmoniously passionate people, they don't they like to win, sure. I mean, people like to win. Winning's wonderful, but not at all costs necessarily, right? Obsessively passionate people, if they don't win, they're worthless. And because they're basing their entire self on that one thing. I am, obsessively passionate about law. Therefore, I must be the best, must win every case, must make the most money, must ... to the exclusion of everything else. And to come back to your point, Caroline, one of the distinguishing factors is how much time we spend doing other things in our lives. With harmonious passions, our pie chart of a life has many colors. Work. And by the way, passion doesn't have to be work. Your passion can be tennis. Your passion can be cycling. It's just something you look forward to doing. And if a portion of that pie is cycling or law or whatever it might be, wonderful. Providing you have other slices, time with my family, cooking, reading a book, watching TV, whatever it might be, that I have other things in my life that I enjoy. The obsessives tend to have one color. This is all that, and because even if you take them away from whether it's tennis or law or whatever that obsession might be, they're still thinking about it. They're still thinking about it. They think I should be practicing, I should be playing, I should be working, as opposed to going, and now I'm with my family and work comes tomorrow. And so that idea of how we pursue things that we are passionate about, or even things that we're engaged by, can really dictate our experience, right? For folks who pursue a harmonious passion, even if their passion is not their work, if they take their time to play golf, tennis, sew, cook, garden, then we tend to be happier overall in their lives, right? For folks who have an obsessive passion, they tend to be unhappier overall. Even if you're not doing tennis at the time, if you're home with your family, you're rated as warmer and friendlier. When you go to the workplace, you're rated as less likely to lie, cheat, or steal. So it has a real knock-on effect in our lives, how we pursue almost anything.
I'm thinking of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who,
yes,
right, not only loves opera, and I understand your mom was an opera singer, but she also loves art. And there was a wonderful documentary about how she, certainly clearly is dedicated to her work, but at the same time, how she pursues these other passions. And I'm thinking about the Special Olympics too, is, when they cross the finish line, oftentimes the response is to run back and cheer on everyone else, rather that's still competing, versus sometimes in professionals, it's just to raise their hands and then walk off the field. There's this sense of connection. There's this sense of community. We did have a request for Nancy speaking, to slow down.
My apologies. I tend to speak quickly. I totally.
Me too. It's all right. And Nancy, we've been thinking about, having somebody write so that with closed caption or whatever that is, but we haven't had got that quite organized yet. But I love this idea of harmonious passion and what was the other one? Obsessive passion. Obsessive passion. Because I know for myself, I've been a little bit obsessive about my work, wanting to, get everyone and all our programming up online, and sometimes losing sleep that I'm not, doing enough. And so this is a great reminder for me as I'm thinking about, the summer, and even how is vacation going to happen? Where am I going to go?
Sure.
Right.
Just a quick note, by the way. The research distinguishes harmonious from obsessive quite clearly, and you and I were speaking about this before the show, about how I'm very hesitant to apply any psychological principle to humankind as a whole, because we are, as you mentioned, snowflakes in the 2015 sense of the word before it got labeled to what it is now, and we're unique. And so, to your point about when you get obsessive about this show. When Alan and I wrote our book, I was so clearly obsessive, and I was not a good person to be around, and reflecting on it going, okay, you don't want to do that again. But also knowing when I get intense about something, I can turn to my family and go, Dad's going to the library for today and maybe the next 2 days. I love you guys so much. I'm going to go obsess for a little while, and I'll be back in a few days. As opposed to going, what's wrong with me? Why am I being so nasty to everybody? Why am I jumping down people's throats? And also not letting myself do it for weeks or months on end. Although for some novelists out there, Maya Angelou, if I recall correctly, she would rent a hotel room. She'd go. She wouldn't leave or talk to anybody until she finished the book. Right? This is how she did it. And so for her, okay, at least she understood how she worked, And so I appreciate that too. So you're being, or seeing some obsessive qualities about yourself, as long as it's a limited way and you recognize it, fantastic.
Yeah, and that's sort of, I know the whole being, we've been introduced to the SPIRE model, and I know that you use with your students the PERMA model, but basically what it is, both of those models are sort of looking like, which are your buckets full, right? Or are you just throwing everything in one bucket? Would you say that's true? And that's a great way to kind of say, wait a second, am I a little bit off course here?
Absolutely.
Right. And knowing your own neurobiology, Debbie Toomey was talking about that yesterday, about saying, how do you, she was telling that she was saying to her kids, and she has kids about the same age of your son, and she was saying, like, watch how you respond to stress. Because you're not going to respond the same as your brother or your sister, right? Watch how you respond to it. Be mindful of what your body does, what you move towards, what you move away from, what you laugh at. We're all so unique. In a way, we're getting to know ourselves, aren't we?
Right. That's it. That's a wonderful opportunity. You go back to what the silver lining is right now is we're spending more time with ourselves and with people that we know, and in circumstance that's pretty consistent. So what are you starting to see consistently, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then I was wondering about your music management and how your family upbringing might have influenced your desire to pursue what you're pursuing now.
Thank you for asking that. I'm trying to figure out the non 3-hour version of this, or I could just lie down on the couch over there and tell you about my childhood. Either way.
Go for it. But also, I mean.
Hold on one second. I'm just gonna lie down.
Yeah. Are you also a New Yorker? Are you?
No, I was born and raised in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
My father was in the Pittsburgh Symphony. He was a flute player for about 45 years, second flute. And my mother was, when I was growing up, she was getting her master's at Carnegie Mellon. She would go on to have a career singing. She was an opera singer and sing. She'd sing here in the city and at Lincoln Center, the Met, and around the world. And so I grew up in this household where music was very important. And I would sneak down the stairs when I was 3 years old after bedtime and hide on the landing and watch my parents, and they'd be playing music together. Just hiding and watching your parents sounds a little creepy, but they were playing.
I think we all did that, actually, in some ways, and it was just whether they were playing cards or talking or watching TV, or I think it's kind of a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
Now that we have devices, kids have devices, I don't know that they do that so much anymore.
I know. Well, screen time's a whole other question. I'm so glad we didn't have that back then. But I saw these people who loved what they did and they were really happy. And, but part of me associated the fact they were happy with the fact they were successful. So here, I knew they were performing in front of lots of people. My dad would drag me to the symphony every Friday night and I would probably fall asleep, in the balcony. But I knew there were these crowds, coming to the symphony. I thought, well, clearly success and happiness has this relationship. And I kind of figured when you're successful, you're happy. So I grew up in Pittsburgh. I loved Pittsburgh. It was wonderful. I went off to college, and my freshman year, I called my dad. I've been playing cello for about 10 years at that point. And I called my dad. I said, I think I want to do this for a living. And he was thrilled. It's exactly what he always wanted for me. He said, wonderful. We will do for you what my parents did for me. And this is not easy, coming from immigrant parents. My father's family came from Russia, turn of the century. My mother's family, my mother's birthday was, her birthday was yesterday. She would have been 75 yesterday, but she was born in the woods in Poland because the Holocaust survivors living in the woods. So musicians don't necessarily come from immigrant families, but they've been very fortunate to have supportive parents who did. And he said, wonderful, we'll do for you what my parents did for me. You leave school at the end of your freshman year and come home and you'll practice every day from 9 to 5 in your room, taking a break for lunch. At the end of the year, you go audition for Juilliard and Eastman and those conservatories. And I thought, wow, that sounds horrible. I had such a wonderful undergrad. I went to Kenyon College in Ohio. It was such a wonderful experience. I was playing soccer there. I had a radio show. I had all these wonderful friends. I thought, I'm not leaving to sit in the room by myself to play my cello. And so I thought I need to figure out what else I'm going to do in in music because I love music so much. And shorten the story, I met an agent. All my summer, spring internships were at some sort of music organization. I was working at Santa Fe Opera one summer after my sophomore year, met an agent. I thought, wait, so what your job is to do is to help young talent develop and make their lives and their skills wonderful. I thought naively, that sounds like the right thing for me. So I left. I came to New York 2 days after graduation. Started at Columbia Artists. Never looked back. Well, didn't look back for about 10 years. And as I mentioned before, I realized some of these people, everyone's super successful. Not everyone's happy. I need to understand what's going on. So I left. And my first foray was into performance psychology. As I mentioned, I played sport at a high level for a long time. So I understood the psychology of athletes, and it's very quantifiable. Are you running faster? Are you running slower? Is your heart rate faster? Is it slower? Let's talk about stress. But I wanted to be able to bring that to others, to musicians, to people who are professionals, because I had so many folks who were so interesting and successful, but suffering. And so performance psychology is basically how we perform at our peak, how we deal with stress, so on and so forth. But it had nothing to do with happiness. And on my syllabus, there were 2 books. One was Flow by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, and the other one was Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman. And I thought, wait, there's science underpinning the idea that one can have well-being and it can give them an advantage in how they perform. I want to know about this. So I ended up going to Penn and studying with Dr. Seligman. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy, and also a huge music lover. And 2 months before graduation, I was introduced through a mutual friend to Alan Schlechter, Dr. Alan Schlechter. And long story short, he invited me to come teach with him. So I had never expected to be a teacher. And then we wrote the book together, and then we, kept working on programs together. I never expected to be a teacher. I think the theme that ran throughout everything I did from really high school on was I'm fascinated with people who are able to perform at their very best. I didn't really care if it was world-class opera or just being their best with a guitar around a campfire singing Kumbaya. Like just people who were striving to get better at things and things they were interested in, but also doing it in a way where there was real well-being. That's always been important. So it's been those 2 things. And now I get to teach, 1,000 students a year. I get to work with wonderful clients. I get to share this kind of information in this format and other formats. And I get a sense that I really get to help people, both as individuals for well-being and expertise, but also the people around them. I saw too many musicians kind of fall by the wayside because they were suffering and thinking, oh, they were so talented and they could have done such extraordinary things for the world around them too. And often that's the answer. One of the answers is, who am I giving back to right now? Right? Who am I helping right now that can diminish stress and anxiety for a performer, in whether you're on stage or you are in a classroom?
Speaking of which, New York is kind of the epicenter of COVID-19 for America, and yet you talk in some of your talks about New Yorkers and famous New Yorkers, from Roosevelt to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and how we have this grit and how we have that balance of other things. I wonder, Broadway's closed, Broadway performers are not able to do what they usually do. It seems to me like there's some lessons here about both our resilience as a city, as people, about what can we tap into? What are some of our innate strengths as New Yorkers, as a city, as a people with that drive to succeed and perform and excel that can help us now?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I'd love to see research on New Yorkers versus the rest of the country when it comes to resilience. Anything that most of us, I imagine the majority of folks here are New Yorkers. Most of us would say, yeah, New Yorkers, we're tough, and so it's not a surprise that we were able to bounce back in the way that I shouldn't say bounce back, it's not fair, to show such resilience in the face of a 9/11, for example. And for now, for us to deal with this pandemic the way we are, which even though many of us are dealing with stress and anxiety, we're actually doing quite well as a city, it seems, right? And when I talk to my friends outside of the city, no one has any experience even close to what we're having. So I don't know any research specifically on New Yorkers. I'm sure it's out there. I'd be really curious to see it. That said, the things that that we see emerging. And there were a couple questions I saw here about creativity, right? One person mentioned that they're trying to take time to figure out how to get back to doing something creative. The ways, I think one of the benefits here of being in New York and being on such a lockdown, again, not a benefit, but trying to find those silver linings, is that we are forced to look at the world differently, right? If someone's sitting there going, I should be out auditioning for Broadway right now, well, guess what? That's not happening, right? And when I talk to friends who are psychologists, who are therapists, psychiatrists, one of the things that they note is interesting is for a lot of the folks who are suffering from things like OCD, for example, they actually are feeling more comfortable now. They're going, yeah, apparently it's not so weird. A lot of people are washing their hands a lot right now. I feel more comfortable. People with social anxiety disorder are going, I don't feel the pressure to have to go outside right now. This is actually a good thing for me. And that's actually been quite helpful for them. But for us, if we're looking to try to pursue something creatively, not being in the pressure cooker of New York, where that often means must perform in public, must do it this way, must be at a certain level, I have found it seems to have helped people engage in ways they wouldn't have otherwise, right? So the question for me would be, what are those opportunities for you? I don't know if you've caught any of the Zoom performances, right? That especially musical theater. Sondheim 70, I think it was 90th. Was that his birthday?
Gorgeous.
It was amazing. And there's Meryl Streep sitting in her living room, and there is Audrey McDonald sitting in her kitchen, and there are other people thinking. And sometimes they forget the words, and sometimes it doesn't go so well. Now, my son is a performer, and he does a lot of musical theater. He did the Les Mis tour, and and when he forgot a line, I'd say, your assignment tonight, because he was like, oh my gosh, I forgot a line. Your assignment for tomorrow is to go talk to 3 of the stars of the show, ask them about a time when they've forgotten lines. And I guarantee, he was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I promise they'll have stories. And so one of the things that we see is someone forgets a line. I go, see that? It happens to everybody. And to see people who are taking chances on sharing their music with the world via an Instagram, if it's not a Meryl Streep and it's not a big show, but rather I'm going to play a piece of music right now. It's actually, who's been doing this so wonderfully. If you follow Jennifer Garner on Instagram, when people tag her with "Look at me, Jen," she goes through all these videos, and they're mostly kids, but there are a fair amount of adults and families who are just doing things that they love. A 12-year-old doing ballet in her kitchen, a 3-year-old dancing it out in the living room, a whole family that's just choreographed something really silly and fun. And it's like they are taking this step because when else would they be able to do it in a way where they're not expected to be at the very, very top and perfect? So I've seen art online. I've seen poetry online that I get the sense people are sharing because this new platform allows them just to reach out in a way they couldn't before. That doesn't have to be perfect. That doesn't have to be at that level necessarily, but because it allows them to share, and people get, and they get feedback and positive feedback from that as well. So I think that's been a wonderful opportunity.
It's like humans, permission to be human, right? As Tal Ben-Shahar says, and also that humans like to make things. We like to create. It's in our DNA. It's part of what we do. And I'm thinking about TikTok and how it's revolutionizing the music industry in a way. It's kind of like the new, MTV or was, because so many people are using it, and not just young people as well.
Right. That's exactly right. And so many of these comments are spot on, right? On the one hand, Yo-Yo Ma's done several concerts, and we're not going to live up to that standard because there's no cellist in the world that is going to live up, like there's a Yo-Yo Ma and they're like 1 or 2 other people. But you can enjoy them. There's a wonderful violin player named Daniel Hope, which is a perfect name, by the way. Daniel Hope has done about 40 salon concerts where he brings people in socially distanced, and anyone from actors to other musicians, which are really wonderful. And then people note the Governor Cuomo launched a PSA contest. Why not go ahead and just have fun to see what you can do, what you can add in a way. It's wonderful. And even if just for your friends, terrific, but it's an outlet you can explore. By the way, one of the most compelling, I think most important ways, one of the reasons relationships are so important, and I think something like this that you've created here is so important, is because we know we're not alone. So when we see someone saying, I'm trying to get my creativity going, I can't figure out what it is, and then we see someone else say it, and someone else say it, we realize we're not the only ones out there. There's this community here. And so I think having that is notable as well, to know that you can share this with people. There's communities sharing it with people, and it's simply wanting to express oneself, wanting to be creative. Right?
I once saw a concert that Yo-Yo Ma gave at Carnegie Hall, and he used a credit card to play the cello. Speaking of creativity, and
Wow. Yeah.
he strikes me as somebody that even with his expertise, he's always wanting to push the edge and getting into sort of psychology about, in a way, this whole crisis has asked us to push our edge, to look at things differently, to figure out new things, to learn new things, to stretch in ways that we have not been comfortable before. Can you speak of being uncomfortable and how that creates growth and how that's maybe part of
Sure.
what the whole performance, and success?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting as I relate it to some of the comments here, the question of uncertainty, the idea that we feel we must be operating 110% as New Yorkers, right? And all of a sudden, the structure is very different, so we don't really know how to operate at 110%, right? For example, right? We don't even have much of a structure anymore on which to hang the speed and the intensity that we had. And yet we have someone here who's making masks for free. That's a way to contribute in terms of meaning and potentially creativity. So, uncertainty it's like we were talking about with fear. There are healthy levels of fear and there are unhealthy levels of fear, right? You want to run away from the tiger because it's going to kill you, right? But if you're afraid of offering something like a piece of music, right, it's not going to kill you, right? But it's really challenging. And I think uncertainty comes in there as well, which is when we have way too much uncertainty, when everything is thrown up in the air, it can be really unhealthy, right? Because we don't know where to turn next. But if we have a moderate amount of uncertainty that we feel more comfortable with, that's what helps us get better at things. Right? It allows us to push a little further. Certainty is mindlessness, right? Certainty is, I know exactly what's going to happen. I don't need to think, right? Mindfulness requires some uncertainty because we don't know what's going to happen. We just need to be in the moment and be with that uncertainty, right? So I think anytime we get better at something, it means admitting that the next time I play this piece, the next time I paint this picture, the next time I speak on a stage, the next time I post this online, I don't really know what's going to happen, right? But if your entire life depends on it, it's too much. If there's none, you're never going to actually go out and post or try or do because you need to be certain. So the uncertainty is really important when it's manageable, right? And for us to then reflect on it and say, what happened there? I posted some poetry online. 6 people liked it. Okay, that's that, right? And often cases, in the question of what's the worst that can happen, as cliche as it sounds, is actually a pretty healthy question to ask, right? During a pandemic, we want to ask that question because we want to be very safe, with our masks and with ourselves. With the creativity question, what's the worst that can happen, can be really helpful. I crack a note. Someone doesn't like my poetry, as opposed to the rest of my life goes south, right? So figuring out what we can tolerate in terms of uncertainty is essential for us to take this next steps and to grow.
And I would imagine that it's different for each person. Again, going back to that, some people can handle more uncertainty than others, and we want to respect our threshold. We have a question for Janie. What is going to be the new normal, in your opinion, for Broadway, New York City Ballet, ABT, Symphony, etc.? Or do we have any sense of that?
I can only speak to my own opinion. Not being my area of expertise. I think in our area, I have trouble imagining this happening until we have a vaccine, at least in a way that, or we have a certain way of testing that allows us to know who's coming in. But even so, think about Broadway seats. I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but I'm still hunched like this. We're very close to people. So do we separate people that way? Do we put up glass dividers? Is it sustainable to do so with 1/3 the audience in there? I don't know. That's a challenge. My other half, she's a restaurant and bar. She's a bar owner here on the Upper West Side, and she has a place called Ease Bar, which is over on Amsterdam, between 84th and 85th. Shameless plug. And yet, it's.
I was curious about what it was anyway, so I'm glad you said that.
E apostrophe S, Ease Bar. Her business partner's a long time Upper West Sider. She's been in the business for a long time, working for other folks. But the question for them is, how do you open in a way that's safe too? That's the question of the entire industry, which I would say extends to Broadway, extends to the ballet. How do we sit near people and feel comfortable and be safe? And that's the challenge. There's some places will be more able to do it than others. Is it financially viable for those organizations? I'm not sure. For us, until we get a vaccine, how are we going to feel about going to those places? A lot of it's going to be individualistic. We talked about experiences throughout the country. My cousins live in Chicago. They don't know anybody who's gotten sick. It doesn't mean that they fully understand what's happening over here and they call to check on us. But for them, they're like, yeah, a lot of people around here walking around without masks. They don't know anyone who's gotten sick. And so they're much more likely to go back to the movie theaters. But here, given what we've gone through, live performances, that's a great question. I wish I could answer it.
Are you seeing more coaching from clients like that? Are you being contacted by people that are in the Broadway profession and asking for help to kind of reimagine their world or their lives? Or
it's a good question. And someone asked earlier, about a half an hour ago in the chat, that they are a performer, and how do you manage a life of a performer while not making enough money? And this city is particularly challenging for that. I can't say that I've been contacted by more clients in that regard. And I think in part it's because it's harder than ever to make a living. A lot of them were working in service industries, and there's no work there now. So how are they going to pay me? I shouldn't say this so just between you and me and the other 76 people on this call, in some cases I've said, I don't care. Let's just get on the phone, don't worry about it. In other cases, I guess I've gotten some more requests to speak at artist groups, right? Groups that get together online to talk through what's challenging right now. So I've been able to do that. I'm saying, yeah, of course I'll contribute my time. I love performers. It's such a place of meaning for me. Do I think artists are reaching out to each other? That's something that I hope they do. Because when I've been on calls where it's a number of artists together and I'm saying, yeah, this is the psychology behind this. I find when I foster conversations between them. So what's everyone doing here? I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. You see people go, oh, I never would have thought of that. Oh, that's such a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea too. And who's challenged by X, right? How are you dealing with that challenge? Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And when you have them talking to one another, I think that community ends up being strongest. For them to come up with ideas for how to perform, I think that's coming from within. My area of expertise is how do you deal with the stress of performing, right? And they're still trying to find venues in which to perform. And I think in a lot of ways, the disconnect of I'm not on stage right now has, for many of them, cut some of that fear away. Being able to see the folks who are doing the big Sondheim shows and knowing, well, they're not perfect, has cut some of that fear away. It's okay. I can get on and do something that's musical. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's creative. It's a wonderful opportunity. And look, all of my friends are doing it too. Oh, we can do it together. That's really been helpful. And I'm hoping that coming out of this pandemic for performers, they'll realize that there is no perfect. And there are lots of different ways to share your craft, share your voice, whether that voice is this voice or your voice is a visual voice or a written voice. There are ways to do it that we hadn't really thought of before. So I see them getting together, and that's wonderful.
Beautiful. I know that you and Dan Tomasulo are dear friends, and he's our Master of Hope, and I understand that his book has been released and that it's number one, which is exciting.
So exciting. I find it exciting, like for the rest of the world too, just to know that, people are able to really, really enjoy and savor and get this from get this from folks, right? Like Dan, and now they're able to listen to things and hear things and take from these things, something that we wanted so badly for so long. I'm going to show you something really quickly. I don't know if you can see this on here. This is a picture of Dan and myself.
Oh, yeah.
In the top picture, probably can't read it. He's holding a sign that says, Dan, the handsome one. And I'm holding one saying, Dan, the smart one. And the other picture, it says, he's holding one saying, Dan, the smart one. And I'm holding one saying, Dan, the handsome one. This is from years ago.
That's great.
So I love that, man. The more Dan Tomasulo out there, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking, in your work with your college students and in your work now and being in New York, what gives you hope? What is like you saying, I know that we're going to get through this, and what are you hopeful about?
So I guess there are a couple things I'd say. I mean, first and foremost, it would be, and just I shouldn't say first and foremost, in no particular order. I was thinking about it yesterday. We've basically been, at least my family, we started locking in early March. So it's been about 2.5 months. And what gives me hope is that we're still here. And I don't mean we're still stuck in here. I mean, we're healthy. Thank God we're healthy. And we're able to manage. And we've had some tough times, and we've gotten through those tough times, being under the same roof together. And we've come through, I think, in many ways better, having spent the time together. That gives me hope. So can I go through another 2.5 months? Yeah, if I have to. I don't want to, but looks like we will probably have to. So the fact we've gotten through almost 3 months, I find hope in that, and knowing, that we can do it. But when it comes to I bring it back to the micro for people. What gives me hope are things that I see every day. Teaching the class and seeing how the students responded gave me tremendous hope. To see how they were able to form a community that was so beautiful. To see how they were able to adapt. How they were able to talk about what was challenging them with one another, and how effective that was. That gave me hope. The idea that people reaching out, whether it's to their families, to their grandchildren in California on Zoom, and knowing they're finding a way to connect, that gives me hope. To make masks, finding meaning in being able to help the community, that gives me hope. Things that we wouldn't have valued before, but we place tremendous weight in now. To be able to have micro moments of laughter gives me hope. And to bring it back almost to the very first question of word wasn't what's the word you used about succeeding, that sometimes at the beginning of the day, if we make a little checklist of 3 things, I'm gonna do my laundry, I'm gonna call my best friend, and I'm gonna cook a nice lunch, even if it's that or something simpler at the end of the day, to go check, 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 I got something done today. That we have these micro moments of opportunity that people are working with, and they seem to be doing well with. And those things give me hope as well. And by the way, the fact that we're New Yorkers, I could say this for most of us, that gives me hope, because people are tough people. I love that.
Right. Bring it. Right. Well, what gives me hope, Dan, is that I know that I have so many nieces and nephews that are in the age range of your university students. And what gives me hope is that there is someone like you that is working with them. And I'm so grateful, because I understand from the research that it doesn't take much. Sometimes it's one person. Sometimes it's a piece of music. Sometimes it's an encounter on the street. I love the New York Diary and the New York Times. But sometimes it's just one snapshot that we can hold on to that helps us stay resilient. And I'm sure that teaching positive psychology and the PERMA model and that to those people, to those young people, has been life-changing. And the fact that you have 1,000 students a year and that they go on and it works exponentially gives me hope for our young people. So I thank you. I thank you for doing what you do. I thank you for coming to our series. And I'm going to unmute everybody so that they can thank you as well.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have an amazing, amazing day, everybody. We'll see you next week. Remember, it's Memorial Day, so we won't see you on Monday. We'll see you Wednesday, Thursday.
Thank you.
Ciao, prima.
Bye.
Thanks, Dan.